In 1177 BC, a king wrote a letter. He was desperate. His city was burning, his army was gone. Enemy ships had appeared on the horizon without warning, and there was nothing he could do. He pressed the message into a clay tablet and sent it. It was never delivered. The tablets were found 3,000 years later, still sitting in a kiln where they'd been left to dry, inside the ruins of a city that had been burned to the ground so completely that it was never rebuilt. That city was Ugarit, and its destruction wasn't an isolated event. In the space of about 50 years, around 1200 BC, virtually every great civilization on Earth collapsed simultaneously. The Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, Troy, Cyprus, Canaan, gone. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse. It's the greatest mystery in ancient history. And the most disturbing part, we still don't know exactly what caused it. Part 1. The world before the collapse. To understand what was lost, you first need to understand what was there. By 1200 BC, the ancient world was more connected than most people realize. Egypt was trading with Canaan and Cyprus. The Hittite Empire dominated Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Mycenaean Greece was a maritime power with a linear B writing system, palace complexes, and a network of city-states. Ugarit on the Syrian coast was one of the greatest trading ports in the world. Ships moved tin from Afghanistan, copper from Cyprus, ivory from Egypt, and grain across the entire Mediterranean. Eric Klein, the historian who literally wrote the book on this, 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, calls it the world's first globalized economy. And that's not metaphor. It was genuinely global for its era. These civilizations weren't just trading, they were dependent on each other. Hittite bronze required Cypriot copper and Afghani tin. Egyptian chariots needed Lebanese cedar. Mycenaean palaces were fed by grain networks stretching thousands of miles. Pull one thread and the whole thing could unravel. Part 2. The collapse. Around 1200 BC, the threads started pulling. Not one at a time, all at once. Archaeologists have excavated dozens of sites from this period and found the same thing everywhere. Destruction layers. A sudden stratum of ash, burned mud brick, and broken pottery, followed by nothing. No new construction, no new inhabitants, just silence for centuries. The palace at Mycenae, gone. The palace at Tiryns, burned. The city of Troy, destroyed. The Hittite capital of Hattusa, abandoned so suddenly that grain was still sitting in the storage jars. Ugarit, burned, never rebuilt. Within 50 years, the population of Greece alone dropped by an estimated 75%. 75%. And here's the part that truly unsettles historians. Writing disappeared. The Mycenaean Greeks had a script called Linear B. After the collapse, gone. Not just the scribes, not just the tablets. The entire concept of writing in Greece vanished for over 300 years. We call this period the Greek Dark Ages, 1100 to 800 BC. 3 centuries of no literacy, no monumental architecture, no long-distance trade. Oral tradition only. Civilization, in every meaningful sense, was over. Part 3. The suspects. So who did it? The ancient Egyptians left us a clue. The pharaoh Ramesses III recorded a massive invasion around 1177 BC on the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. He described a confederation of seafaring peoples who appeared out of nowhere. In his words, no land could stand before their arms. They swept through the eastern Mediterranean, burning everything in their path. He called them the Sea Peoples. And this is where the mystery deepens, because nobody knows who the Sea Peoples actually were. Their identities have been debated for over 150 years. Some historians link certain groups to the Philistines of the Bible, Mycenaean Greeks who'd lost their own homeland and were now invading others. Some may have come from Anatolia, from the western coast of modern Turkey. Others may have been from the Aegean Islands. What makes them so strange is this. They weren't one civilization. They were a coalition. Multiple different peoples, speaking different languages, coming from different places, all moving together across the sea at the same time. Why? One theory is chilling. The sea peoples may have been refugees, people fleeing a collapse that had already started in their own homelands. They weren't causing the Bronze Age collapse. They were part of it, swept up in it, displaced, and desperately seeking somewhere new to go. The destroyers may have been destroyed first. Part 4. The real answer. Here's what we know for certain. In the decades leading up to 1200 BC, something went wrong with the climate. Pollen samples, isotope analysis, and sediment cores taken from across the eastern Mediterranean all show the same thing. A prolonged drought lasting decades, beginning around 1200 BC. Crops failed, famines followed. In letters found at several Bronze Age sites, kings are desperately writing to Egypt begging for grain. "It is a matter of life and death," one letter reads. At the same time, the trade networks the Bronze Age depended on started breaking down. The tin mines were disrupted, the grain shipments stopped. The specialized craftsmen who made bronze weapons had no materials to work with. Armies couldn't be equipped, cities couldn't be fed. Eric Klein calls it a systems collapse, when a system is so tightly interconnected that a failure in one part cascades rapidly through everything else. Think of it like this. The Bronze Age world was not just globalized, it was fragile because it was globalized. Every civilization had optimized for the world as it was. Abundant trade, stable climate, reliable partners. Nobody had built resilience for a world where all of that went wrong at once. And when the drought hit, when the harvests failed, when the trade routes buckled, when the sea peoples appeared on the coasts, there was no buffer, no redundancy, no fallback. The whole system shattered. Not one catastrophe, not one enemy, not one bad king. A perfect storm. Drought, famine, disrupted trade, displaced populations, internal revolts, and yes, foreign invasion. All hitting simultaneously, amplifying each other, in a world that had no slack left to absorb any of it. Part 5. The last letter of Ugarit. Let's come back to Ugarit, because the tablets they left behind are the most haunting document in ancient history. In the ruins of the city, archaeologists found dozens of clay tablets in a kiln, letters that had been prepared to send but never dispatched. The city fell before the messengers could leave. One of them is a letter from Ugarit's king to the king of Cyprus. It reads, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." Another letter, from the king of Alashia, probably Cyprus, warns Ugarit that enemy ships have already been spotted offshore. He advises them to be on guard. The reply never came. By the time those tablets were drying in the kiln, the city of Ugarit was already on fire. When it burned so completely, and the disruption that followed was so total that no one ever returned to rebuild it. The ruins sat undiscovered until 1928, when a Syrian farmer's plough struck an ancient stone. Part 6. Why it matters right now. Here is the question historians and economists are increasingly asking. Could it happen again? Eric Klein doesn't just write for history buffs. His book is read by government policy analysts, economists, and military strategists, because the parallels to the modern world are uncomfortable. We live in a deeply interconnected global system. Just-in-time supply chains, digital infrastructure spanning continents, food systems that depend on fertilizer from specific countries shipped through specific ports, energy networks that cross dozens of borders. And like the Bronze Age, we have optimized aggressively for efficiency, and efficiency is the enemy of resilience. When COVID hit global supply chains in 2020, the world got a small glimpse of what systemic fragility looks like. Semiconductor shortages stopped car production on multiple continents. A single container ship stuck in the Suez Canal disrupted global trade for weeks. That was a stress test. The Bronze Age failed the real thing. The civilizations of 1200 BC weren't primitive, they weren't incompetent. They had writing, architecture, metallurgy, long-distance trade, diplomatic correspondence, and complex bureaucracies. They were, by the standards of their time, extraordinarily advanced. And within 50 years, it was over. A man named Hammurabi had written legal codes. Ramesses II had built temples that still stand today. The palace at Knossos had indoor plumbing. Then came the drought, the ships, the fire. 300 years of darkness. The lesson isn't that collapse is inevitable. The lesson is that collapse doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give warning. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It comes as a drought that lasts a little too long, a trade route that goes quiet, a ship on the horizon you weren't expecting. And by the time you're pressing the message into a clay tablet, the city is already burning. The Bronze Age collapse took 50 years. That's one human lifetime. People were born into the world before the collapse, a connected, prosperous, literate civilization, and died in the Dark Ages, watching it fall apart around them, not knowing why, not knowing when it would end. History's most important lesson isn't about the past. It's a question for right now. How fragile is the system you're living inside? If this made you think differently about how civilizations actually work and fail, the next video goes deeper into the systems that hold modern civilization together and the pressure points historians are watching.